Hey, let's talk about winning and losing. And this has come up a lot in my interviews, and I've done a bunch of polls on LinkedIn about it and try and really hone the poll down to not give people an escape. Because, you know, and the question I boiled it down to is which motivates you most? Avoiding the pain of losing or the desire to win? And the comments I think are more valuable than the voting. Because I think if you really think about it, because I don't think people think about it, I think people just react to it. Where, oh, I'm an optimist, I pick winning, or, I just hate losing. Some people, it just goes kinesthetically. And in my interviews on the podcast, I've asked it as well, because about 2 years ago, somebody said, I would never hire anybody who was focused only on winning. I want to hire people who just hate to lose. Do you have strong feelings about this, or?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've seen some of your polls, but yeah, I mean, I think I feel like I'm pretty self-motivated. I want to be successful, go-getter. I want to make things happen, so I almost expect to win and do well, and I always like raise the bar on myself. So like that's just like a daily thing, a weekly thing. Like that's where I want to be. So the avoiding to lose, or like when I do lose, I think that hits me harder because I'm just already trying to expect to get to big things and make things happen. So, but at the same time, you have to be aware of it. And I think kind of have the right mindset behind losing, because if you have everything riding on this one deal or losing something, like it's going to mess you up significantly. So I think I've gotten better as far as like how to manage that, and then, learning from it as well if that does happen.
And there were certain people that said neither, and most of them weren't in sales, but the ones that were in sales, uh, you know, I would like to interview them to say, well, why are you in sales? And a lot of people give the, oh, I want to help people. And it's like, well, why don't you join the Peace Corps? You could help a lot more people in the Peace Corps than you can in sales. And you sell a commodity, so it doesn't matter if they buy yours or someone else's anyway. Are you really helping anyone other than
Hmm.
yourself and your company? So I like to get people to be honest, because I think that's a bullshit answer.
Yeah, it's like if someone puts like a 6 or 7 on some poll on some scale from 1 to 10, it's kind of like a cop out, like in the
It is a
middle, like
cop
not
out.
really. Yeah, so I like your style. Just don't give them an option to do that. Just say, yes or no. Like you have to answer one way or the other. But yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's like, why would you, if you're in sales, like it is to help people. I think that is true. But like the reality is, yeah, you could go do a lot of other stuff that would help more people, and you probably want to make money. Most likely,
Oh yeah, really?
that's probably number
Yeah.
one up there.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Why not go into support
Yeah.
or marketing? You can help a lot of
Yeah.
people in marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then that's the thing too, is winning. Like why you like winning is because the more you win, the more money you're gonna make, right? So go figure.
Yeah. And what I always used to do with my reps is I'd ask them, well, what makes you think you're winning? Oh, they like me, or they love me. I'd always get that response. I go, um, how do you feel if you're going to lose? Or what would the signals be that you're losing this deal? And they would look at me like, what do you mean? I go, well, we don't have the PO, so you haven't won. You feel like you're winning. You're competing. What makes you think you're not losing? I don't know. Tell me. And then all of a sudden, they started thinking about all the things they should do, because our brain is a pain avoidance machine. Losing is painful. Even if you don't care, nobody wants to lose.
Mm-hmm.
It hits your identity. You put it up on the forecast. Now you lost a deal. No one cares why. They
Yeah.
assume it's because of you. And all of a sudden, the energy starts to change in the room. People start to think about what the holes are in the deal. If you focus only on winning, are you thinking about what could go wrong?
It's a great point. And it just made me think too, is like a lot of times I think reps, like you put the pipeline, probably what, half of it isn't real. I don't know what you see from all your experience, but like that pipeline is like never accurate. And then sometimes you feel pressure to put stuff in there because of whatever's going on, your competition or other reps or your manager. And then I think people just start convincing themselves that like that deal is real and that it is going to close by a certain date, but then they don't have all the stuff you're talking about actually like mapped out of like, why is it actually going to close by that date? So I think reps also convince themselves that that deal, that they are going to win that deal, and they go down that track, and then they don't actually poke holes in it like you're talking about. And that could be pressure from the company, their manager, or just like the whole pipeline's never real anyway. I don't know, but that also is a big issue. I feel like is people start convincing themselves that they're going to win a deal when it's not the case, and they haven't really thought about it because they're so focused on winning it, I guess.
Or avoiding thinking about how they could lose it. Because how many people have last day of the quarter, they don't have the purchase order. Their champion told them it's in procurement, but procurement hasn't reached out for an updated quote or anything. They won't tell you who in procurement's working on it. Maybe they don't even call you back. But we still think it's going to close. It
Yeah, you
expired on
don't
Monday.
yeah. Yeah, you don't want to admit to yourself. You don't want to admit to yourself that it's not going to close. And then people probably don't want to give you the bad news sometimes too, even if
Nobody
you're talking to
wants.
somebody. Yeah, yeah. So they don't, yeah, the customer definitely doesn't want to tell you that. But then even if you're trying to bounce off other people, they might not want to like break you down and be like, dude, you're not going to close that this year. So that's the other thing too. I guess there's a lot of kind of aspects behind it with that part.
And then you see your competitor's logo on, or your customer prospect logo on your competitor's slides as a customer. And you're like, wow, that's ironic. Maybe they have a different division. And I think people are in denial. I think also that you need to balance it a little bit, and it's periodic, meaning that it has to be elastic. You should care a lot near the end, but not so much at the beginning, meaning that you have to really go for the win. But as the deal progresses, be asking yourself, how do I know I'm winning? Each interaction goes, was a winning conversation? Is that what it sounds like when I win a deal? Or does that sound like when I lose a deal, but nobody's telling me?
Mhm.
You know,
No, it's a great, yeah.
are they pushing me or are they pulling me?
Yeah, it's a great point. I like that. Like not be as attached at the beginning. And then of course, when you get closer, it makes more sense to be attached to it. And you have to have like milestones and checkpoints of like, does this really feel like a deal? Like, is there momentum? Are they agreeing to the next step, whatever that is, like a meeting or trial, etc. So you have to have some of those gut checks to kind of know where you're at. And then that also helps with not taking it too personally and not getting crushed by it. Because if you're like, you can kind of get these signs like, all right, well, maybe the timing's not right. I'll just put this, 6 months from now and I'll kind of do these other deals and like let it just kind of naturally progress and see what happens. Like you can kind of balance stuff if you have that mindset versus thinking you have to get that one done because of whatever pressure you have from your company or your boss, just because it's like a big brand name. And then when you're talking to them, it's like, this isn't going to happen in the next year. Like I need to move somewhere else. But that's all easier said than done and takes a lot of time and probably experience to get to that point, kind of navigating all those deals.
Because a lot of reps have kind of this mindset, I want to do as little as possible to get the deal instead of whatever it takes to get the deal. There's a big difference there. Because when people find out they've lost a deal, they're willing to do anything, right? They'll fly out the next morning, they'll call the CEO, they'll bring 24 roses, they'll cave on the discount they said they never cave on, they'll throw in a bunch of stuff. But why are you doing that only when you found out you lost instead of before when you weren't sure you were going to win? Why weren't you willing to do the extra mile then? Because now when you find out you lost, trying to repair that is what, 5%, 10% likelihood?
Yeah, it's a long shot. No, it's a
Oh,
great point.
sure.
Yeah, and I try to be different and stand out in a variety of ways, like throughout the process, and you kind of build up your own brand. So I was just thinking of something this past week. I basically did a free workshop for somebody because I knew it was a potential to get our name out there and hopefully meet people down the road. But like I sent a thank you follow up, but I did a video thank you, right? Just because I know no one's doing that to them. It doesn't take a ton of time, honestly, because I'm used to doing it now. But like, what they're going to remember Dustin probably differently than other people because I did that as a thank you versus just writing a boring email that no one's going to read anyway. So just stuff like that. I mean, you just got to think about things of how you can, stand out. And yeah, that's a great point. It's like when you know you lost it, you freak out and you're like trying to going crazy to do everything, but you should be having that mentality from the very get-go for strategic ones that make sense. So yeah.
And the other pet peeve I have about it is everybody kind of placates themselves when they lose, saying that they learned. I don't lose, I either win or I learn. And I'm like, that's about the same level of bullshit as I do this to help people. I go, yeah, did you learn? What did you learn? And then they look at me like, what do you mean? Well, you learned something. Tell me what you learned. Oh, I learned I hate to lose is usually what they tell me. It's like, oh, you didn't know that? Is this the first time you found that out? And they're like, well, it was a good reminder. So you didn't learn, you remembered. Did you write it down? Well, I'll remember it until next quarter. And then they're like, oh, because that kind of taught me another lesson or another law about sales is you don't learn anything in sales until you put something in your process to prevent it from happening again.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's when you've learned.
It's a great point. Yeah, I have a Word document that is like says mistakes, and it's just all mistakes made over the years in a variety of ways. And typically, I will say it is from losses. However, you bring up a good point. It's like people always want to learn from their mistakes. Hopefully, they do write them down. Most people don't even write it down, which is not good either. So, but you can do the same thing from winning, right? Okay, so if you win a big deal, like what were like the 3 or 4 things of why you won, and keep track of that too. That way you can prevent stuff as well or add something into your process. So I think people do postmortems more for losing, but like how do you do that for winning all the time too, so you can actually keep track of the good things as well? And that's probably something I need to get better at. But I do have a list of mistakes made, so at least I'm not banging my head against the wall doing the same thing over and over again. But I will say, even there's a lot on there, and like if I don't go back and look at it sometimes, you're going to forget stuff, right? Even if it's small things. So
yeah, because I had ironically a case study that was identical that happened to somebody in the courses on office hours, where you've got a champion who says, we've got budget, we want to go with you, they'll do whatever I recommend, all I need is a quote for this, I'll get it signed, we'll get started next week. And it sounds too good to be true, right? And it's like, oh no, not looking at anybody else, we definitely want to do it, budget's no problem. Do you think that deal closes?
No, those never do.
But boy, is it easy to fall into that, isn't it?
Yeah, those are the worst. I don't know what it is about that, but it's like the ones that you think are like 99% sure. There's usually some gap there. So that's funny that you brought that up, because it's happened to me. It's happened to me many times for sure. And then the ones that are like kind of out of nowhere sometimes, and you're like, man, that one kind of came out of nowhere. And there's trends with both of those. You have to just keep track of it somehow.
Right. Sometimes it will close. It's not like it's obviously it's never going to close. But typically what ends up happening is somebody wants it. They've picked you. They think they've got more power than they do. But they don't have any budget authority or don't have the political gunpowder within the company to get it done. But it makes perfectly logical sense to them. And then is when you have to pump the brakes and make sure that the other ingredients of a deal are in place, and have the conversation with who can approve it without it turning into a commodity. And I think hubris, overconfidence, and our sheer desire for the deal blinds us to what we're doing wrong.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that goes back to like being too personally attached to it for whatever reason. Which yeah, I mean that's not good. I mean, I've seen a lot of people just really struggle when they lose a big deal and it like messes up their whole life from a variety of ways for a couple weeks or something. So it's like that goes back to like, okay, how do you I think you need to be not have everything in one basket, and you need to be well-rounded outside of your work and sales. I think early on I used to focus too much on that. So like it would hit me harder if I messed something up or if something didn't go through. So it was like mess up everything. But now that I become more well-rounded in other things outside of work, I still hate to lose, right? But it's not like the same level when it was like work, work, work all the time, you know? So I think something too is like to be well-rounded with other hobbies or other interests outside of just that deal. Otherwise, you're going to take it really hard one way or the other. So that's something too I've worked on as well.
And this is what managers don't get, or the best managers do get, is that reps should and need to talk about their deals, and that managers should play the customer. Should be like, well, so why am I doing it now? Why not a year from now? Why should I do it with you guys versus those guys? Where is this on my priority list? It's always on the top of our priority list. We're always thinking now at this dollar amount, but they're not thinking that way. That's what a good sales coach, a good sales leader does. Doesn't do it vindictively or judgmentally, just does it kind of on a role play type of thing. Now, you did a lot of good work here, but what do you think the risks are? Oh, there's no risk. They love us. They've got the money. Look at the news, right? They're going places. But it's not moving. Why? Oh, you're only talking to one person there, and he's blocking you. Who's their manager? Oh, I don't know. Who in procurement's going to work on? Oh, I don't know. Or has security talked to you yet? No, they don't care. Or all the ingredients of the deal, the only one ingredient they have is there's somebody there that likes us, wants it. We got a quote for them, and they say it's going to get done, but it doesn't.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. I wish more managers did that because most of the time they're focused on like KPIs and how many calls did you do, which is completely irrelevant most of the time. So if they would just take like your top two deals and like go through that, like I like talking about that stuff. So I feel like I don't manage anybody right now, but like that's 10 times better than just like beating someone up about how many calls you made or whatever KPIs they have. I mean, that's just a waste of time for everybody, and it's just going to burn people out. So if you just like once a week, a lot of people try to do these one-on-ones weekly. Like I've been worked for a lot of companies where they have these one-on-ones, but it was like rarely would it break down deals. It was like it was all BS stuff, or like some company thing that we had to be ready for. It was never like stuff that would actually help the rep, right? So that's a good comment.
Yeah. And even if you write down like the top 5 forecasting questions, where is it? Who has economic approval over this? Why are they doing it now versus a year from now? What are their other options? What are their other priorities? What is the approval process? And then you just ask yourself those questions and just speak into your phone, because that verbalization will kind of get you thinking about the things that you have been trying to avoid thinking about. Because the time to realize you've lost is not the last day of the quarter, because you have no time to repair it. It's before you step into the trap, before you give them the proposal, before you give away everything. Because otherwise you lost control. There's no momentum to the deal, and you're totally dependent on one person. And what happens when they go on vacation for the holidays? Oh, they didn't tell you that? Yeah, it's where they have no cell reception.
Yeah,
So
you got to be honest with yourself, right? I think you have to be honest where you're at, like how your performance is going, like is it going to happen? So if you're not honest with yourself, then you're just going to be lying. So like having those top 5 questions is a great idea, and and like not just winging it and expecting that one person is going to make it happen. Cause I feel like that's harder and harder now, especially with like enterprise type stuff. It's just everybody makes like group buying decisions. So you got to have multiple people. So you have to prepare, you have to have that mindset that, you know, if you're not doing something right, like fix it earlier on versus at the very end, right? So at least have that at the beginning where you're like, okay, hey, I actually need to meet these other two people if I want to close this by the end of the year. But if you're not like thinking like that, you're just going to be like, you're going to take it really hard when you lose probably, and just blame, and you'll blame other people most likely too. It's not your fault, even though internally they'll blame you, but like yourself, you'll probably blame other people that something happened of why you lost it. So
Yeah, and it is hard to do because if you get too paranoid, you're not focusing on the right things. And if you get too optimistic, you're not focusing on the right things. And the worst time to be thinking is when you're interacting with the client, because then you're not really thinking, you're kind of reacting. And what's the default? Yes, sir, I'd be happy to send you whatever you need. And then you send it to them and you go, I shouldn't have done that. You can't pull it back. You can't change the dates. You can't change the configuration. You got to anticipate these things. And they're hard to anticipate. And that's why, like when you wrote down your lessons, because they're going to repeat. I've seen people been in sales for 30 years. They do the same things over and over. I get the emails, the in-mails on LinkedIn all the time. You know, I've sent them the document 3 times. They've opened it, but they're not signing it. You know, well, guess why? They probably don't have authority to sign anything. They probably haven't talked to their manager about it. Manager knows nothing about it, doesn't even know what it is. And you think this is going to close? You think they're going to sign it? You think some engineer or first line manager has authority to spend 50 or 100K without anyone else's involvement? Oh,
no, yeah, it's a great point. I think, and I keep thinking about the winning deals, right? Keeping track of all the good things from that. I feel like that's a great takeaway compared to just learning from your mistakes. Like learn from your wins and like, or talk to other reps, right? Like a lot of people work for big company. Talk to the top reps the last few years because they'll most likely be more than happy to talk to you about it, especially when you go to a new place. So interview them and be like, hey, when have you lost deals? When have you won deals? Like, what are the top few takeaways? You'll get some great things too from that.
because it is pattern matching, because no thing works in 100% of the cases. Because sometimes it will just go through. And it probably has in the past, or it does with existing customers. Add-ons are easier to sell than a new account. But by hearing the other reps, it's like, oh, you get a new account. They say you're definitely going to do it. What do you think can go wrong? And they'll laugh at you and they're like, oh, this is what's going to go wrong, because they have no emotional attachment to it. They've seen the other people. And this is the good thing about the QBR is when you hear other people talk about their deals, I always used to write down what I thought the deal was going to close and how much. And then the next QBR, I'd see how correct I was on both my deals and other people's deals. And this is a great habit that I had, projecting how I thought the deal was going to progress compared to how it really did progress. And it never progressed the way I thought it would. But that's how I learned. Don't do that. Don't believe that. Yes, they believe it. Doesn't mean I have to believe it. Doesn't mean it's a lie. It just means that's their interpretation of what's going on there. And then you get the meeting with the CEO and they're like, what's this we're talking about? Why are we doing this? It's like day 1 for them. And you're day 90 into this. And you've got your CEO looking at you like, he doesn't know anything about this. You don't know if he's acting or if it's just negotiation or it's the truth. And a lot of times it's the truth. They know something about it. They're switching from someone else to us, but they haven't put any brain energy into it. So if you don't have your, stuff in line and you can prove to them that they did the due diligence, that, although they haven't been involved, but this has been going on for 3 months and this is the comparison and this is why we're doing it now. Because your champion probably doesn't have that mojo. because I
Yeah,
used to
not
sell to engineers and they all thought the world revolved around them, but yet they couldn't get things done.
yeah, no, you gotta have, I mean, it's very rare to find a champion that's like that go-getter that's trying to move up in the company and make a name for themselves and like battle. And then they gotta build trust with you to like, they're not just gonna put their neck out for anybody, right? So if it's for you or whatever your service is, that's awesome. And then, but you can't rely on one person typically. And then you also, yeah, to your point, eventually it's gonna go up to somebody high up and they have probably 25 things on their desk that they're supposed to approve and they don't have time to look at anything. So like, how do you make it as simple and easy as possible for that person or coach up your champions or champion to do that? So yeah, it's like that whole kind of ROI thing with those type of folks. You got to be, that can get dicey when you have multiple people in the room towards the end if they have no idea what's going on. So I think like having like an executive sponsor, whatever that means exactly at the beginning, and kind of get them involved somewhat, so at least they know what's going on. So at the end, it's not a complete shock out of nowhere. They're like, oh yeah, I remember talking to Dustin a few months ago. Like, seems like they did all the steps or something like that, so that at least you have that built up before the very end.
Yeah, because I think most reps, they see the game that they're playing is they convince a champion that they're the best product at the best price, and that's it. That's what I do. I answer their questions. I give them pretty proposals. I give them extended evals, and the deal happens. And that's what somebody really wrote under one of my videos explaining that you're not understanding the internal game. Everyone's playing the communication game, not the sales and buying game. And she comments, oh, all you have to do is answer all their questions, give them updated proposals and all the information they need. No, that's being a sales clerk, not a sales rep. Anyone can do that. That's assuming they know how to buy. And I'm sure she manages accounts as opposed to sell new accounts. Because if they're buying another whatever from you, you probably already have the technical win, and it's just getting budget for another one. She may be right in that case. But if you're going into a new account and you're competing against Siemens and 5 other vendors and you don't know who's favorite and what the other vendors is telling them about how bad your stuff is and how great their stuff is, and the world's changed since you last bought, giving them a fresh quote and answering the questions, that's just the start. That's like 10% of the sales process.
Oh yeah, there's a huge difference. I've worked for big companies where I had that brand and it was more, I guess you could say, order taking. I've seen both sides of it. So when you're trying to find new business, I would kind of think of myself as like a project manager. So how do I, from start to finish, kind of make it easy for them and connect all these dots, like talk to these different departments, all these different people. So I'm like that they can rely on, because most of these big companies, they don't even talk to each other internally. It's like they're like in silos, like across, especially the really big like hospitals or whatever. So like I was like the person that would set that up and like connect people. And sometimes that would push people, rub people the wrong way, but eventually they're like, okay, hey, Dustin's got these meetings set up. He's got everyone on the same page. Like they would appreciate that because they didn't have anybody to do that internally for these projects because they had a million things going on. So I started looking at myself like that. It's like, how can I take it from start to finish, make it easy for them? They see me as more of a resource versus like a salesperson, and et cetera, et cetera. So that worked well for me, especially when I was dealing with Home Depot and hospitals. So,
and I've had, talking with procurement people, and they've actually said, some people just come down here with a quote and they tell me to buy it. And I have to like call their manager and explain that's not how it works. That this has to be approved. And I've gotten to the point when I was on site, I would get on their online procurement process and enter the stuff off the quote into it. And I'd see the approval stack, take a picture of it, and then go and meet each of those people to get it approved.
Ooh, I love that. That's awesome.
Because the user, they don't even think that it's necessary for them. They think they're above that their wish should just go into the ether and the